Creepypasta is one of those internet terms everyone recognizes but few can define cleanly. Technically, it's a portmanteau of the words creepy and copypasta. Copypasta itself being a portmanteau of copy and pasta, play off the copy and paste command. It describes short blocks of text that spread across the internet through sheer repetition. Most early copypastas were jokes, absurd rants, or chaotic bits of internet folklore. Think of the infamous Navy SEAL rant.
What the fuck did you just fucking say about me, you little bitch?
A breathless wall of threats, misspellings, and bravado that bounced from forum to forum until it became a meme. Eventually, people began applying the same copy and paste logic to scary stories, and creepypasta emerged as the label for horror that circulated in this way. But here's the problem. The stories we now consider foundational to creepypasta don't actually fit that definition. Take Slender Man, for example, the faceless face of the genre. He didn't begin as a text-based story at all. He started as a set of eerie photos posted on 4chan, then mutated into stories, videos, games, and a whole mythology. So if the genre's most iconic figure doesn't meet its supposed criteria, what is a creepypasta? To answer that, we have to go back, before Slender Man, before the word itself, and trace how internet horror evolved into a culture. The early foundations of creepypasta can actually be traced back to the late 90s. This was smack dab in the middle of the internet's first major explosion, offering the first time in which the average individual could connect with people anywhere in the world. There were forum pages all about, everyone carving out their own little corner of the internet to discuss whatever they wished. Yet one of these topics of discussion was rather strange. In 1998, people began discussing memories of a weird arcade game that appeared briefly in suburban areas near Portland in the early 80s, a simple black arcade cabinet with the name Polybius. The game was strange, to say the least. The visuals were described as geometric and abstract, and the game was said to have a sort of psychoactive effect. Children who played were said to suffer from amnesia, seizures, night terrors, and even hallucinations. Yet they would become incredibly addicted to the game. They would stand in line for hours, fighting amongst one another, even breaking into arcades outside of operating hours, all for a chance to play this game. Within just a few weeks of this mayhem, men in black suits showed up and removed the cabinets. No mention or evidence of the game had been found since. People were quick to theorize that it was perhaps part of some government experiment, maybe even MK Ultra, which would explain the game's sudden disappearance and how all traces of it were seemingly wiped. Of course, none of this was true. These people who claimed to have played Polybius were either intentionally playing into this rumor or misremembering other games from their childhood. Nonetheless, this spread across the internet like wildfire, and despite being disproven, still circulates to this day. Around this same time, another major milestone was beginning to unfold. In late 1998, a website was launched called BlairWitch.com. The site spoke of three young filmmakers, Heather Donahue, Michael Williams, and Joshua Leonard, who had gone missing in the woods of Maryland in 1994 while making a documentary about a mythological local hermit who was claimed to abduct and slaughter children. The site said that the footage these three had recorded had been recovered and was being released to the public as a film, The Blair Witch Project. The site was filled with fictional police reports, news articles, journals, and interviews, but despite what it may have wanted you to think, this was not a real story. The Blair Witch Project was an experimental indie horror film that had been made on a $60,000 budget. With this tight budget, they had to get creative with their advertising, so they went to the internet, and before the film had even had its first showing, the site had already garnered over 100,000 views, an impressive feat for the time. But this was only the beginning. Soon after the film's first successful showing at Sundance in January of 1999, the rights were acquired by Artisan Entertainment. The studio saw the potential of this viral internet advertising campaign and were ready to amplify it. They relaunched the website, adding regular updates to the investigation and even sending interns across the country with missing posters for the film's main cast, interviewing people about their disappearances. The site would explode, racking up 3 million hits per day in 1999. By the time the film's theatrical release had arrived, the general public sat in a state of genuine uncertainty as to whether or not the events of the film were real. This would be the primary driver behind the film's success, bringing in $250 million during its theatrical run, off of a $60,000 budget. Not only was this the first example of a movie using viral internet advertising, but this also shows how a horror story presented as reality can spread online. Timeline, an idea that's still prevalent in creepypastas today. Not long after this, in March of 2001, we got the beginning of what is widely regarded as the first ever creepypasta. On a site called Angelfire, an early blog site, a man named Ted began posting about a new cave passage he and his friend had discovered. He decided to start posting about it so that any friends or family who wanted updates could keep up with the process. Over the course of a couple months, Ted would post updates to the site, chronicling him and his friends' progress on accessing this new cave passage that they had dubbed Floyd's Tomb. Things are normal at first, but as it progresses, there are oddities. The duo hears strange sounds like screaming and scraping stone. Ted's friend, who he refers to as B, brings his dog on the first few trips until it begins acting strange when near Floyd's tomb. A third caver, Joe, is recruited to squeeze through and explore the passage. He comes out shell-shocked, refusing to speak on what he saw and cutting contact with Ted and B. Despite this, the two continue working on the cave, feeling this almost supernatural draw to it. This all comes to a head when the passage is finally opened up enough that Ted can enter. He goes into Floyd's tomb where he encounters a strange creature. He and B run, narrowly escaping. This seems to be the end of things until Ted makes an update on May 19th. He wanted to give an update on his condition and his plans for the cave.
I tried to eat, but I had no appetite. I was restless, but I couldn't find anything to do to take my mind off the experience. Then things started to get strange. At first I was hearing sounds in the house that had no explanation. Footsteps, shuffling noises, creaking doors, the typical horror movie fare. Only the sounds were not distinct. It was though I wasn't sure I heard what I thought I heard. I would be eating or getting out of the shower and stop, thinking I heard something, but the sound would not repeat itself. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that it happened so frequently, I wouldn't be sure there were noises in the first place. Either way, I was scared. It was as though I'd been caught in a spider web for the last week. Feelings of anxiety, foreboding, tension filled my life. Then came the hallucinations. 2 weeks after we went in the cave, and a week after I began hearing things, I began to have nightmares. Extremely lucid nightmares. No specific theme or recurring events, just plain terrifying. Sometimes I was in my house and someone was trying to get me, only I couldn't run because I had no legs. Other times I was in a vat and someone was pouring a syrup-like liquid on me. Filling the vat, I would wake up in a panic. I would stay awake until exhaustion forced me to enter the dreamland once again. A brutal routine. I felt compelled to get in the car and drive. My pulse pounded in my temples as I got in and started the car. I wanted to drive to Overlook Point to see the city lights. I didn't know why I needed to go there, but I knew I had to go. The closer I got, the more urgent the feeling. When I arrived at the point, I saw something that at first startled me, but then caused me to be more relaxed than I'd been in a long time. Joe was there. "We need to return. Tomorrow good?" I asked. "Yeah, noon." He got in his car and I got into mine. Drove over to B's house. I ran into Joe, and we're going back in tomorrow at noon. B looked dead serious. He just nodded his head. For my family and friends who are reading this, I say, be at peace. I will conquer this cave, then I will return and update this website immediately. I'll include any photos we take in the cave today, and if you stop by the house, I'll show you the video I'll have. I expect to be home later tonight or tomorrow at the latest. See all of you soon with a lot of answers. Love, Ted.
This was Ted's final update. The story has a lot in common with the Blair Witch Project ad campaign, in the sense that the appeal is the fact that it seems so real. Reading the first few entries feels like you're just reading about a guy in the early 2000s who loves caving. It helps that the author, Ted Hageman, hopefully that pronunciation is correct, was just a guy in the early 2000s who loved caving. Unfortunately, the magic would be ruined due to a controversy. A short story titled The Fear of Darkness would begin to circulate, claiming to be the full story that Ted the Caver had copied. This would force Ted, the author not the character, to address it, proving that his story had come first and, in the process, revealing that the story was purely fiction. In September of 2004, we would get a story that borrowed from Ted the Caver and built upon it in such a way that not only launched the story itself, but the career of its author. The website dianiahouse.com would appear, the setup of which was similar to that of the previous. It was a blog created to share communications between the site's creator, Eric, and his friend Mark. From here, the bulk of the story is told through a collection of emails between the two, following their investigation into a mysterious, malevolent house that lures, alters, and consumes people.
I keep going to houses that keep eating me like a bug.
The story would become so successful that by 2005, Warner Bros. Bought the film rights for it. This, to my knowledge, is the first creepypasta to sell its film rights to a major studio. Unfortunately, the film would get stuck in development hell and was never made, but it did open the door for its creator, Eric Kaiserer, who would carve out a successful career in screenwriting, with films like Arrival and Bird Box. In the following year, there would be sporadic activity. This image would appear on a Japanese forum on August 1st. By November, this rendition was uploaded. In 2006, we got a bit more. The word copypasta was added to Urban Dictionary, and the first use of creepypasta was recorded. This is also around the time we get our next notable figure in the world of creepypasta. A thread was started on 4chan titled, "Let's Make a New Monster." Naturally, there were countless ideas that were presented, ideas that have been lost to time, but one stood out so much that it would get its own thread. Started with this post.
Alright, this is for the people who like the 3 eyes, no apparent mouth, pale skin one. Here's what we've got so far. Humanoid, about 6 feet tall when standing, but usually crouches and walks on all fours. It has very pale skin. The face is blank, as in no nose, no mouth. However, it has 3 solid green eyes, one in the middle of its forehead, the other 2 on either side of its head towards the back. Usually seen in front yards and suburban areas, usually just watches the observer, but will stand up and attack if approached. When it attacks, the mouth opens up as if a hinged skull that opens at the chin reveals many tiny but dull teeth.
This thread would build upon this entity, dialing in its appearance and calling it the Rake after its sharp claws. Come 2010, the story most commonly associated with the Rake was posted, compiling a series of sightings of the creature from throughout history. It would also receive, arguably, its most iconic characteristic this year, the famous image associated with it. This is important, as it would make the Rake one of the earliest creepypastas to have a specific image associated with it, something that would become a staple of future stories. The most interesting aspect of this character is the fact that it didn't have a specific story associated with it for the first 4 years of its popularity. It existed solely as a character, a creature built upon communally by the internet, and this idea was probably best explored by something that started the following year in 2007. On 4chan, the first SCP creepypasta, SCP-173, was posted.
Item: SCP-173. Object Class: Euclid. Special Containment Procedures. Item SCP-173 is to be kept in a locked container at all times, and personnel must enter SCP-173's container. No fewer than 3 may enter at any time, and the door is to be relocked behind them. At all times, 2 persons must maintain direct eye contact with SCP-173 until all personnel have vacated and relocked the container. Description: Moved to Site 19, 1993. Origin is as of yet unknown. It is constructed from concrete and rebar, with traces of Krylon brand spray paint. SCP-173 is animate and extremely hostile. The object cannot move while within a direct line of sight. Line of sight must not be broken at any time with SCP-173. Personnel assigned to enter container are instructed to alert one another before blinking. Object is reported to attack by snapping the neck at the base of the skull, or by strangulation. In the event of an attack, personnel are to observe Class 4 Hazardous Object Containment Procedures. Personnel report sounds of scraping stone originating from within the container when no one is present inside. This is considered normal, and any change in this behavior should be reported to the acting HMCL supervisor on duty. The reddish-brown substance on the floor is a combination of feces and blood. Origin of these materials is unknown. The enclosure must be cleaned on a bi-weekly basis.
This story was attached to an image of the Japanese sculpture Untitled 2004. What was intended to be a standalone short horror story would blow up, with other users making their own stories in the same style, set in the same universe. This would form the basis of what we now know as the SCP Foundation. These stories are set in a fictionalized version of the real world, in which there is an agency called the SCP Foundation, whose purpose is to secure, contain, and protect against supernatural entities. This idea would become so popular that by the next year, it would have its own website. The core of this site was simple. Anyone could contribute. Anyone could post their own entry about their own SCP, and if it was good enough, it would be added to the greater canon. In 2008, we'd see a couple other things of note. Creepypasta.com, a website cataloging stories like these, was created. We'd also see an important video uploaded to YouTube. Username 666 was a video uploaded that showcased someone looking at a cursed YouTube channel, simply titled 666. The channel would display bizarre bizarre, grotesque imagery and seemingly take control of the user's computer, preventing them from even shutting off their PC. This marks one of the earliest examples of internet horror on YouTube, something that will become more widespread later. This next year, 2009, is the start of what I call the Creepypasta Golden Age. There are countless famous and iconic stories from this point on. There's some establishing information necessary to properly understand this creepypasta. In the 90s and early 2000s, something known as chain emails began popping up. These were emails that requested that you forward them to a certain number of people in a certain time frame to be blessed with good luck or to avoid dire consequences. SmileDog takes this concept in a more supernatural direction. A cursed image called smile.jpg began to be shared around via email, and whoever looks at it would be cursed with horrific nightmares and visions. This curse would remain until the victim either shared the image to someone else or succumbed to their madness. The original story followed someone investigating this mysterious image and eventually becoming cursed themselves. The story ends with the author attaching the image, revealing that, in doing so, they have cursed all who read it. This story sits in a fascinating spot as it was never shared around like you would expect for a creepypasta, yet the entity itself based its powers around being shared in-universe. It's a kind of cool meta creepypasta. By March, we get Candle Cove. This story plays off of meta elements in a similar way to SmileDog. While SmileDog was based on the mass shared nature of creepypastas, this story took inspiration from things like Polybius, these internet urban legends that spawned from the collective memories of random internet users. The pasta takes the form of a forum discussion. Things begin fairly innocuously. A user mentions a strange kids show from the early 70s called Candle Cove. Over the course of the story, more users begin to recall details of the show, until things take a dark turn. Users remember strange episodes, which seemed completely inappropriate for a show targeted to kids. The story ends with this shocking reveal. I visited my mom today at the nursing home. I asked her about when I was little in the early 70s, when I was 8 or 9, if she remembered a kids show, Candle Cove. She said she was surprised I could remember that, and I asked why, and she said, "Because I used to think it was so strange that you said, 'I'm gonna go watch Candle Cove now, Mom,' and then you would tune the TV to static and just watch dead air for 30 minutes. You had a big imagination with your little pirate show." This creepypasta was created by Chris Straub, who would go on to major success with his series Local 58, the grandfather of analog horror. Later in the year, a story was posted titled The Russian Sleep Experiment. While a lot of the creepypastas of this time era had leaned more into being fiction, this story goes back to the roots of the genre by portraying itself as a true story. This style of creepypasta would sort of separate itself into its own genre, which will become more relevant later. This story discussed a supposed experiment that took place in the 1940s, where Russia attempted to study the effects of a powerful stimulant gas by using it to keep a set of prisoners awake for 15 days. By day 5, the subjects began to behave irrationally. This quickly deteriorates into absolute insanity and self-mutilation, until the 15th day finally arrives. The scientists cut off the flow of the gas, which sparked immediate protests from the prisoners. They were all in horrid physical condition and would die immediately upon falling asleep, whether naturally or through sedation. At the end, one of the scientists is holding the last living subject at gunpoint, demanding to know what he is. The subject reveals itself to be a mysterious, near-supernatural entity that exists in all humans, one that is kept dormant and restrained by the act of sleep. Shortly after this story, in the month of November, the story 1999 was uploaded, as well as the original image that would later be associated with Eyeless Jack. We also got the original upload of both the SuicideMouse.avi YouTube video and Creepypasta. The story is about an animation that was viewed by a Disney employee of Mickey Mouse walking an empty street. The video gets progressively more warped until it finally ends, at which point the employee viewing it immediately grabs a gun from a nearby security guard and blows his shit smooth off. I only draw attention to this story as the writer also uploaded a YouTube video of the same name, which is meant to be a recreation of the animation that was viewed in the story. This is the first instance to my knowledge of a creepypasta being directly tied to a YouTube video. Now, even with all the heavy hitters I've covered, there's one creepypasta from this year that stands above all, literally and figuratively. On June 10th, 2009, a supernatural Photoshop contest was held by the Something Awful forums. A user by the name of Victor Surge posted these two images with the following text: "We didn't want to go, and we didn't want to kill them, but his persistent silence and outstretched arms horrified and comforted us at the same time. 1983, photographer unknown, presumed dead."
One of 2 recovered photographs from the Sterling City Library blaze, notable for being taken the day in which 14 children vanished and for what is referred to as the Slender Man. Deformity cited as filmed effects by officials. Fire at library occurred 1 week later. Actual photograph confiscated as evidence. 1986, photographer Mary Thomas, missing since July 13th, 1986.
This was the origins of the Slender Man himself. The concept would become incredibly popular with various people building off of it and adding lore. One of the earlier examples of this was another Something Awful user who wrote of a supposed account of a creature from German folklore called the Grossman.
My child, my Lars, he is gone. Taken from his bed. The only thing that we found was a scrap of black clothing. It feels like cotton, but it is softer. Sika, Lars came into my bedroom yesterday, screaming at the top of his lungs that the angel is outside. I asked him what he was talking about, and he told me some nonsense fairy story about the Grossman. He said he went to the Grosswire village and found one of my cows dead, hanging from a tree. I thought nothing of it at first, but now he is gone. We must find Lars, and my family must leave before we are killed. I am sorry, my son. I should have listened. May God forgive me.
The user would claim that this was an early sighting of Slender Man. This character would spread all over the internet through various art and stories. As I touched on earlier, there's not really one specific story it's connected to, which makes the character kind of unique compared to other creepypasta. There's one that I most associate it with, a story about a girl named Lindsay who encounters and is attacked by Slender Man in her apartment. We then swap to the perspective of her sister, Nicole, going to visit her in the hospital. We get this passage.
As Nicole walked into her sister's hospital room for the first time, she thought she spied the silhouette of a man in the window. That, she knew, was impossible. Her sister's room was on the 3rd story of the hospital.
Beyond all of this, there was one particular creation that arguably popularized the character and mythos of Slender Man, something that requires a brief detour. Marble Hornets is a found footage analog horror series based off of Slender Man that began airing only 10 days after the original images were posted. The series is made up of logs posted by Jay Merrick, who is investigating the production of an unfinished student film directed by his friend, Alex Crayley. 3 years before, Alex abruptly ended the project after 2 months of production. Before getting in contact with Jay, Alex gave him the tapes containing raw footage from the film and told Jay to burn them and never talk about it with him again. Jay, of course, watches the tapes. He finds that Alex had been haunted by this mysterious entity called the Operator, and by watching these tapes, Jay is now haunted by this entity too. During his investigations, Jay encounters a strange masked individual who works against him. This is later revealed to be Tim Wright, someone who had worked on the production of Marble Hornets. It turns out that when in his masked persona, he is under the control of the Operator and cannot remember any of his actions. This is the origin of what would become known as proxies, this idea that Slender Man can take control of people and entities to do his bidding. This would become one of the most iconic parts of the Slender Man mythos, with many other creepypasta characters like the Rake being dubbed as proxies. Another important detail from this series is that the characters who are haunted by the Operator have strange symptoms of some mysterious illness, most notably a bad cough. This is what would become known as Slender Sickness, another massive part of the Slender lore. The Operator's presence would also cause visual and auditory hallucinations, which is probably even more iconic than the prior traits this series introduced. It cannot be stressed enough how much Marble Hornets contributed to the character and mythos of Slender Man, not only because of what it directly introduced, but also because it inspired other similar projects. In March of the following year, a video series called Everyman Hybrid would begin. The series was about a group of friends who started a fitness series that included a fake Slender Man haunting as a joke, until the haunting becomes real. The group then has to investigate these mysterious entities and why they're pursuing them. The main contribution from this series was the inclusion of the Rake as an antagonist and proxy of Slender Man. They also reinterpreted Slender Sickness as a literal radiation that the entity produces, also adding the nosebleeds and headaches that are now probably the most iconic symptoms of the sickness. This series started just after in June. It takes heavy inspiration from Marble Hornets, following Noah Maxwell discovering old footage of himself and his recently deceased cousin, Milo. He soon notices a tall, faceless figure following Milo in the background of the tape. This entity then Tim begins to follow Noah. The main contributions from this series is the appearance of Slender Man, as it relied heavily on special effects rather than practical, and the presence of the Collective, which is the earliest major example to a cult to Slender Man being depicted. I talk about these series because it makes Slender Man unique, as he is most known for his depictions in the visual medium rather than a text story. This is a trend that would continue with the character, but we'll get to that later. In January of 2010, a story titled Dead Bart was uploaded. The story itself was nothing special. It's about a lost episode of The Simpsons so graphic and disturbing that even the creator of the show won't talk about it. An episode in which Bart Simpson dies. We follow the author as they view and describe the episode. I mention this story for one reason, a particular choice of description that changed the genre forever. At the beginning of the series, Matt had an idea that the animated style of The Simpsons world represented life and that death made things more realistic, hence why it was used in this episode. The picture of Bart's corpse was barely recognizable. They took full advantage of it not having to move and made an almost photorealistic drawing of his dead body. Act 1 ended with a shot of Bart's corpse. When Act 2 started, Homer, Marge, and Lisa were sitting at a table, crying. This crying went on. It became more pained and realistic, better acting than you would think possible. For guests who died since, like Michael Jackson and George Harrison, the dates for when they would die. The credits were completely silent and seemed handwritten. The final image was the Simpsons family drawn on their couch, like in the intros, but all drawn in the hyper-realistic, lifeless style of Bart's corpse. Shortly after, in April, a story titled Squidward's Suicide would build on this idea. That isn't the oddest thing though. What's odd is that everyone has hyper-realistic eyes. There was now what appeared to be blood running down his face from his eyes. The blood was also done in a hyper-realistic style, looking as if you'd get it on your fingers if you touched the screen. He immediately puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter splatters the wall behind him in his bed, and he flies back with force. Indeed, these stories were the beginning of the infamous hyper-realism descriptor, so prominent in stories today. On another note, in between these stories, a subreddit called r/nosleep was created. This forum was created to capture a particular aspect of famous creepypasta, the idea of telling them as if they were true stories that actually happened. This would become one of the premier locations for creepypasta and remains so today. Shortly after, the Creepypasta wiki was also created. On August 30th, a streamer known as Copeland would experience a strange encounter while playing an early version of Minecraft. This entity would spread like wildfire, becoming known as Herobrine. Eventually, a story would become associated with a character, in which it is claimed that Herobrine is the spirit of the dead brother of the game's creator. This year continues to be stacked as the first part of Been Drowned is uploaded in September. In this story, we follow a college student who buys a haunted copy of Majora's Mask. The entity inside is revealed to be the spirit of a boy named Ben, who drowned as a child. Very creative. The spirit spreads to the author's computer before being spread to the greater internet. At least, that was the case in the first part. After that, it's revealed that basically none of this is true and that Ben is actually a collective of spirits of children that were killed by a strange murder cult and put into a video game for research or something, I don't know. The story gets really weird after the first arc. It still remains unique though, due to its interactive elements, making this one of the first popular creepypastas to be made as part of an ARG. For those who don't know, an ARG is an alternate reality game. It's an interactive, immersive storytelling experience that utilizes the real world as its platform, where players work together to solve puzzles and uncover a hidden narrative. This has appeared before in video series like Marble Hornets. In October, a story titled The Theater was posted. This story describes a forgotten video game in which you endlessly loop through a theater, with every loop leading you to increasingly strange and disturbing encounters. The endless looping nature of the empty theater setting could be argued as one of the earliest examples of liminal horror. Roughly 2 weeks later, we got a short story titled Mr. Widemouth. It features an antagonist that shares the story's title, and is described as looking like a creepy Furby. This likely had an impact on the creation of the game Tattletale, one of the earliest entries into the mascot horror genre. In the year of our Lord 2011, we would begin to get a lot of creepypasta that would become iconic for all the wrong reasons, and there's no better example of this than Happy Appy. This pasta is a repetitive, dragging tale of a psychotic kid show creator murdering children, also predicting 9/11 for some reason, and I cannot stress enough how needlessly long this story is. It is approximately 28 100,000 words. That is a full novella's worth for Apple. It did result in the greatest episode of Creepypasta ever made though, so at least its legacy isn't all bad.
Last post, fuck you!
Later in the year, Sonic.exe was posted. A close contender with Happy Happy is the worst creepypasta of all time. The story follows the author as he plays a cursed copy of Sonic, in which Sonic is evil and kills everyone. The story ends with Sonic proclaiming that he is God and then entering the real world to kill the author. This story will become relevant later. We also got Jeff the Killer, which I did a whole video on. The story follows a young boy named Jeffrey Woods who is bullied and brutally maimed until he loses his mind and becomes a serial killer. Despite the original story being so garbage, something about the character of Jeff would resonate with people and spread to become one of the biggest pillars of the genre. Maybe it was just a creepy picture. Stories like these are probably why we got the Trollpasta Wiki this year, which was dedicated to creepypastas so bad that they could only be interpreted as intentional trolls. We did get some good stories this year though, like No End House and Normal Porn for Normal People. The following year picks back up, thankfully. We get Eyeless Jack, which, okay, that one's not very good. It's about a mysterious eyeless entity that steals and eats your kidneys. But we do get a bunch of legitimately good stories, like the disappearance of Ashley, Kansas, Tomino's Hell, and The Showers. There are two in particular that I want to cover in depth, the first of which is Anansi's Goat Man. This story isn't really important to the greater history of creepypastas, but it's one of my personal favorites, so I just had to talk about it. The story was posted to 4chan and starts in the site's traditional green text format. This was a posting format for telling usually comedic stories like this.
Be 3 years old, standing in living room next to leather sofa. For no apparent reason, think to myself, I will remember this moment. Still do.
The story doesn't maintain this very long, thankfully, dropping it for a traditional storytelling format. We proceed to get the story of our author, a teen from Chicago taking a trip to visit family in Huntsville, Alabama. He ends up camping with a bunch of other people his age and they encounter a creature they call the Goat Man. The Goat Man takes the form of people and tries, and at times succeeds, in blending in with the group. The kids are terrified but are able to eventually get home safely. The story stands out to me for two main reasons. The first is the setting. Being from rural Alabama, it was so easy to put myself in the place of the author when reading this story as a kid, and scenes like this were so much more effective.
Kira starts heaving. I don't know how the fuck to describe it. Sort of like if someone with their back turned was laughing without actually making any sound. It was this fact that made me realize there was not a fucking sound in the whole woods. It was dead silent.
This is effective enough as is, but for me it's even more so, because I can literally just picture walking in the woods on my grandfather's property and everything just going silent. The other thing is the Goat Man itself. A unique aspect of the story is how we never really understand the goal of the Goat Man. It's never actively hostile outside of trying to infiltrate the group, but even when it does this successfully, it never harms anyone. It even follows the group the whole time they're leaving the woods until they reach the edge, at which point it just turns around and walks away. Something about not only not understanding the creature itself, but also not being able to understand its motives makes it so much scarier. The other story I wanted to talk about is Abandoned by Disney. In this story, a journalist is investigating an abandoned Disney location where he finds a supernatural photonegative Mickey mascot. This description makes it sound underwhelming, but the story is unironically good. It's written well even if certain scenes have been critiqued over the years. You know what? Actually, I'm going to talk about that. During the big climax of the story, people often criticize the reveal of photonegative Mickey as it says, "Wanna see my head come off," and rips its weirdly biological head off. People criticize this because it feels like it comes out of nowhere, to which I say, can you read? It's a basic matter of emphasis. The context of the scene is that our prospective character finds an old mascot costume and removes the head, finding a corpse inside. At this point, a photonegative Mickey appears and says, "Wanna see my head come off?" The emphasis is on the "my" because the POV character just removed the head of a different suit. It makes perfect sense. Beyond that, the story is iconic and would get some sequels that are arguably even better. It explores the ideas of tulpas and thought forms and is one of the earliest creepypasta to do so. If you haven't read them, you should. The story also got an adaptation to a certain medium that would become prevalent for creepypastas in this year. It's time for another detour, this time into the world of creepypasta games. In 2014, a little indie project you may have heard of called Five Nights at Freddy's was released. This game achieved a level of virality that I don't think was ever truly recreated except for maybe Fortnite. Despite this, the gameplay itself was rather simple, so much so that fans were able to easily recreate it in games of their own. And one of the earliest of this FNAF fan game craze was Five Nights at Treasure Island, an abandoned by Disney-inspired fan game that was released just 4 months after the original FNAF. The game itself is set on the titular Treasure Island and features photonegative Mickey as its primary antagonist. This game was a massive success and would go on to form an entire studio that would put out a sequel that borders AAA quality. Yet this wasn't the beginning of Creepypasta games, far from it. No, that occurred a few years earlier. 2012 was a massive year for Creepypasta video games, the first of which was SCP Containment Breach. In this game, you play as a worker at the SCP Foundation when multiple dangerous entities breach containment. The star of the show is fittingly SCP-173. Because of this, the game utilizes a unique blink mechanic. Every 10 or so seconds, depending on difficulty or when the player inputs, your character blinks. This gives SCP-173 an opportunity to move even when you look at it. It also have horrific ramifications on the genre of indie horror, with countless games since trying to force this stupid blink mechanic when it's not needed. The game would go viral, with tons of large YouTubers playing it. Markiplier, for example, made 67 videos on the game over the course of 7 years. This would garner millions of cumulative views. In the same year, a recreation of the cursed ROM described in the Sonic.exe creepypasta was made. This was another step up in internet fame, with creators like Markiplier and PewDiePie both getting over 10 million views on their videos of the game. The game itself was simple. You kinda just walked to the right until the creepy stuff happened. And said creepy stuff was just what the original story described word for word, bar for bar. Despite this, the game had become so successful that it would create its own subgenre of creepypasta games, .exe games. These are a detour in and of themselves, but I'm already mid-detour, so I'll have to refrain. Yet this wasn't the peak of virality for the genre. That would come some 2 months later. Arsec Productions would release a game titled Slender the 8 Pages, in which you are wandering the woods attempting to collect 8 mysterious pieces of paper while Slender Man chases you with increasing aggression. This is where the staple static is really solidified, and there's a strong argument that this game is what made Slender Man the household name that it is today. Markiplier's first video on the game would get 2.6 million views, Smosh 18 million, PewDiePie 14 million, even the fucking annoying Orange would get 39 million views playing this game. It was so successful that it received a sequel the next year titled Slender the Arrival. In this game, you play across multiple locations with different goals, all the while trying to avoid Slender Man and a new enemy, his servant called the Chaser. Chaser kinda looks like some weird cross of Jeff the Killer and Hoodie. In lore though, it's actually revealed to be the player character from the 8 Pages, who was made into a proxy. This game was another smash hit, with Markiplier getting even bigger 5.2 million views on his first video, PewDiePie getting 9.4 million, and the annoying Orange getting another 9 fucking million for some reason. These games thrusted Slender Man and creepypastas as a whole into such mainstream popularity that I think it can be argued that they single-handedly kicked off the next era that I will be covering, the Fandom Age. This was the era where many creepypastas were created with their purpose not to tell an interesting story, but rather to create an interesting character that would get a lot of art and fanfictions. One of the biggest examples of these are Laughing Jack, a creepy clown demon that pretends to be a child's imaginary friend before fucking crucifying him and tricking his mother into killing her own son. Two-dimensional edge aside, the story would go viral, mostly because people thought the clown guy was hot. Big surprise. There was also Tiki Toby, which followed a teenage boy with Tourette's who couldn't feel pain. He grows tired of his abusive father and becomes a proxy of Slender Man before murdering his dad. All of this sort of reached a nexus point, to me, with the Slender Mansion. This concept was popularized by a Wattpad story called Cold and Dark, in which a blind girl is taken in by Slender Man. She lives with him and other popular creepypasta characters in his mansion in the woods dubbed the Slender Mansion. To me though, the best example of the Slender Mansion was another Wattpad story I found through the YouTuber Davis Morgan. It was called Living with Creepypastas. The story follows a self-insert your name character who is a girl that discovers she's the bastard child of Slender Man and is taken in to live with all the big creepypastas like Jeff the Killer and Ben Drowned, as well as Slender Man's brothers. These brothers include Slender Man, who's really happy, and Trender Man, who's obsessed with fashion. We don't talk about the other brother. With the growing popularity of projects like these, it wouldn't take long for the entertainment industry to take notice, and notice they would take in 2018. Slender Man, 2 words, was Sony's attempt to bring the creepypasta icon to the big screen, and it was really bad. Like, really bad. Today it sits at a 3.3 on IMDb. The film makes a lot of questionable decisions, especially with the design of Slender Man. We give him this weird biological pattern that just coincidentally looks like a suit, instead of him just actually wearing a suit. I assume these were attempts to try and make him more realistic and less supernatural, which kind of misses the point of the character. The plot is pretty basic. A group of girls summon Slender Man in an attempt to save their friend, who summoned and was kidnapped by Slender Man. It was pretty boring, and the acting, CGI, and pacing of the movie was all pretty garbage. A lot of people were also put off by the characterization of Katie, the friend that is taken by Slender Man. She seems to be based to some degree on the real girls behind the very real tragedy of the Slender Man stabbing, in which 2 young girls stabbed their friend to near death in an attempt to summon Slender Man. This movie absolutely bombed, and Hollywood became hesitant to attempt another creepypasta adaptation. That was until recently. In 2022, a set of strange images of an eerie liminal location went viral. These images would be subjected to lore, being dubbed the Backrooms, a near endless realm of repeating office buildings that exist on a plane outside of our own. To get there is simply luck, as one wrong step can send you no clipping out of reality into this endless prison. This concept would go insanely viral, peaking when YouTuber Kane Pixels uploaded a 3D animation based on it. This video, titled The Backrooms Found Footage, would get 90 million views, leading to an entire series of videos that would add up to a fuck ton of views, roughly 256 million to be exact. One box office failure wasn't enough to ignore all this success, at least not for A24, who would pick up this series to be adapted into a film, headed up by its creator Kane Parsons, at only 20 years old. Unlike Slender Man, this movie would not suck. It currently sits at a 7 on IMDb and earned $374 million in the box office, off of a $10 million budget. With this, I think it's safe to say that we are currently living through the time in which creepypastas are finding the most mainstream success. Now, there is one issue with these movies. Creepypastas at their core are a collaborative, communal creation. This fact makes the topic of ownership quite tricky. That's right, I've got one more detour into the weird world of creepypasta copyright. Due to all the iconic depictions of the character, each with their own contributions to the grander lore, a compromise was made for the character of Slender Man. The rights to the original images and lore, effectively the general character, would go to Eric Knudsen, aka Victor Surge, the man who created the character on the Something Awful forums. The video game rights would go to Blue Isle Studios, the developers of Slender the Arrival, who have done absolutely nothing with it. And finally, the film rights would go to Sony. Alternative versions of the character were granted their own copyright as well, like the operator from Marble Hornets. It was a similar story for Kane Parsons in the Backrooms. This was arguably even more collaborative than Slender Man, so there were heavy arguments that it should be public domain. Ultimately, the decision was made that Kane could have copyright over his specific lore of the Backrooms, while the core setting and concept would be public domain. Another strange situation involving creepypasta copyright actually had nothing to do with determining ownership, but rather what the creator did with it. Castaway, the creator and owner of Tiki Toby, made the decision in 2020 that they no longer wanted to be associated with the character, having the original story removed and attempting to effectively wipe the character from the internet for a few years. The creator has since laxed on removing existing stories, but still holds strong that they don't want any more creepypastas made using the character. The biggest example of this, though, is the situation surrounding SCP. The SCP Foundation was built around community contribution, the idea that anyone could add to it. Because of this, they firmly believed in keeping the property public domain. That was until 2019. A man by the name of Andrei Duskin trademarked the SCP Foundation in his home country of Russia, using this as an attempt to take control of the site and produce merchandise, at least in Russia. There's been a huge legal battle over this, attempting to contest Andrei's or anyone's claimed ownership of the property. Unfortunately, this case hasn't been given much attention and hasn't really progressed to this day. These days, creepypastas have generally become much more niche niche, yet they've proven to offer a path to mainstream success. Beyond even the obvious examples like the Backrooms, the previously mentioned r/no sleep has proven to be a consistent path for writers to find an audience, and with stories like Baraska, Tales from the Gas Station, and We Used to Live Here, to become a published author. Hell, We Used to Live Here as a movie in the works. But I think the prime fandom charm of creepypasta is long past. I don't think we'll ever see another Slender Man or Jeff the Killer, but it was a hell of a ride while it lasted. Which brings me back, finally, to the question I asked at the start. What is a creepypasta? To me, it's any character, entity, or narrative that spreads through online communities and grows as people keep adding to it. And once I landed on that definition, I realized that this isn't new at all. We've been doing this for millennia. Cryptids are creatures that rely on eyewitness accounts, rumors, and local legends rather than scientific proof. They're communal creations, stories that evolve because people keep telling them. From ancient monsters in the 5th century BC to modern ones on 4chan, the pattern is the same. Creepypastas aren't a break from tradition, they're an evolution. At their core, creepypastas, cryptids, and folktales alike are all based around creating creatures and stories to scare, entertain, and most importantly, connect us. It's community granted a haunting form. So the real question is, what shape will they take next? Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below, and feel free to do all the other YouTube stuff while you're down there. If you've made it this far into the video, with the utmost sincerity, thank you, and I will see you around. Bye.